Welcome to this YSL Microsoft Excel tutorial. In this video, we're going to show you how to use the min and the max functions. So these two functions are designed to return the minimum and maximum values from a range of numbers, and we'll start with some simple examples of each function. We'll show you how you can use the AutoSum feature to quickly insert multiple minimum and maximum functions in a worksheet, and also how to work in group mode to add these functions across a range of different worksheets at the same time. We'll show how you can use the min and max functions across a range of multiple sheets to return the biggest and smallest values from that range of sheets. And then towards the end of the video, a couple of more interesting uses of min and max, combining it with the XLOOKUP function to return related information, and then also using min and max in conditional formatting rules to, for example, highlight the biggest and smallest values in a table. So let's get started. To get started, I've created a workbook with several lists of films. As usual, if you want to follow along with the video, I'll drop a link in the description below so you can download the same file and follow along if you'd like to. So this video is all about the max and the min functions. The max function allows you to calculate the largest value in a set of numbers, and the min function simply calculates the smallest in a set of numbers. So we can demonstrate that using the first worksheet here, the top 10 films by year. So I've got 3 separate tables showing the top 10 highest grossing films for the last 3 years. If I want to work out the value of the longest runtime for those films in 2021, I can select cell D13, and inside that cell I can type in a formula equals max. I can then simply refer to the cells that I want to find the maximum value of, so that's going to be cells D3 to D12, close the round brackets and hit enter, and I get the biggest number in that list. I can do the same thing then for the worldwide gross as well. If I hit the cell next door to that, I can say equals max. This time let's use the keyboard shortcuts to select the range of cells we want. I'm going to press the up arrow key once to move up into cell E12, then hold down Control and Shift and tap the up arrow key again, and that extends the selection up to cell E2. Then I want to hold down the Shift key and tap the down arrow once to bring the selection back down one row to include only the numbers. At that point, if I close the round brackets and then hit enter, I'll get the biggest value in that column there. It's fairly obvious which one that would be because they're sorted in descending order of worldwide gross, so the most successful film financially is at the top of the list. The min function does the exact same thing but returns the smallest value in the list. So if I head into cell D14 and say equals min, and then just select the same block of cells again, that's going to be D3 down to D12, close the round brackets and hit enter, that's the smallest number, and then this time I'm just going to fill that formula across to the right and then apply some formatting to it. So with cell E14 selected, I can press Ctrl R on the keyboard to fill that formula to the right. Sadly, it doesn't apply the same formatting, so let's use the Format Painter to quickly copy and paste the formatting from the cell above. Typing in the min and the max function is fairly quick and easy because the function names are so short, but you may be able to speed up the process even further by employing the AutoSum feature. It's not quite as misleading a name as it first appears, AutoSum. Let's do this with the 2022 highest grossing films. I want to find the biggest runtime in cell D28. So once I've selected that cell, I can head up to the AutoSum button in the Home tab of the ribbon, click the drop-down arrow next to that, and then choose Max. It inserts the max function and suggests the block of cells to find the maximum value of. It guesses correctly in this case, so I can hit enter and that'll insert the result. Let's do the same thing for the maximum worldwide gross. Go back to the AutoSum button, choose max, and again it picks the correct block of cells, so I can just press enter. It won't be quite as successful when I choose to insert the min in this row 29 because I've inserted something in between the block of cells I want to take the minimum of and the answer cell. The guess of which cells I want to use is going to be slightly incorrect. But if I choose the min function from the drop-down list next to the AutoSum button, all I need to do is take the selection back one row to not include the biggest value, the cell D28. I can do that in several ways. I could just click and drag on the cells, or I can hold down the Shift key and tap the up arrow key to move back one row. If I then press enter, I'll get the right result, and then again for the next cell along, let's insert the min function again, and hold down Shift, tap the up arrow key, and then hit enter to get the minimum of that. You can use the AutoSum feature to insert more than one min or max at the same time. So to do that, let's have a look at the 2023 highest grossing films. I'd like to get the maximum runtime and worldwide gross in one go. So to do that, I can select the two cells I want to populate, head back to the drop-down list next to the AutoSum button, and then just click on the max function. This time I don't even get offered a selection of cells, it just instantly gives me the results, hoping it guesses correctly that the block of cells it's using is the one that I want. As it turns out, it is. So you can see there, hopefully, if I get that correct, you can see that it's picking D33 to D42, and then E33 to E42. Again, doing this with the min function is going to be a little trickier because I've inserted something in between the block of cells I want to use and the location of the answers. But if we select the two cells D and E44 and then head back to the AutoSum button and choose min, we'll see that it instantly gives us a result which happens to be the right one. It's returning the smallest number, but it has inadvertently included the total cell there, so it's extending the selection down to D43. Now I can change that again fairly easily by just adjusting the cell reference, so I can either click on that and manually change it to D42 and then hit enter. I can also, if I select the next cell, and edit that one either by double clicking on it or pressing the F2 key. If I highlight the block of cells, I can then manually reselect the ones I actually want to use. When I then and this time it gives me the sensible formatting, which I can then use the format painter on to apply that to the max, which didn't apply the correct formatting previously. So we've used the min and the max functions to find the smallest and biggest numbers in single ranges of cells, but you can also use multiple non-contiguous ranges of cells in a single min or max function. So I've got a little summary section here on the same worksheet where I want to find the biggest runtime of any runtime in this worksheet. To do that, let's start by inserting the max function. I can use the AutoSum button to do so once again, but I don't get any suggestions this time because the cell isn't close enough to any numeric values to suggest anything. But it helps me to not have to type in equals max at least, so probably still worthwhile clicking. Anyway, I now need to select the first block of cells I want to try to find the maximum value of, and that's going to be cells D3 down to D12. If I then type in a comma, that will move me on to the number 2 parameter of the same function. And you'll just see, if I quickly zoom in on the tooltip there, you can see I've also got a number 3 parameter, then this little ellipses symbol there. So the more numbers I fill in, the more numbers I get offered to fill in. I can fill in up to 255 different separate ranges here. Of course, we're not going to get anywhere near that number, just 3 for this example. So I've got my first set of numbers typed in and typed in a comma. I'm going to then pick my next block of numbers, which is going to be cells D18 to D27, then another comma, and then the final block of cells, which is going to be D33 down to D42. Having done that, I can press enter, and I'll get the biggest number from that entire list. It's exactly the same process for the min function. If I wanted to find the smallest runtime, I can head back to the AutoSum button there and insert the min function. It does suggest for me now a cell containing a number, but that's fairly pointless, finding the minimum number of a single cell. So instead I'm going to reselect the block of cells I want to use. So just going through the same process. Select a block of cells, type in a comma, select the next block of cells, type in another comma, and then the final block of cells, and then press enter. And there we go, the minimum of those numbers. I could follow the same approach to work out the biggest and smallest worldwide gross figures from these lists, but because I've already got the min and max of each separate list calculated individually, I can make the process a little bit easier. I don't need to select quite as many cells. So for the biggest worldwide gross, let's insert the max function first. Then we'll just ignore the suggestion of cells it wants us to use and head straight down to where I've calculated the maximum worldwide gross for the 2021 figures and select just that one single cell, E13. Then I can type in a comma and then select the next subtotal or max function I've entered there for the worldwide gross, which is cell E28, then another comma, and then the final one of those figures. When I press enter, I'll get the biggest one of those 3 numbers. And of course, once again, it's exactly the same process for the min function. If I insert the min function in the next cell down, ignore the suggestion it gives me, and then work through the individual minimum gross box office takings I've calculated, typing a comma in between each cell reference. Once I hit enter, I'll then get the smallest of those three numbers in that cell. Now let's look at what to do if your data is spread across multiple different worksheets rather than in a single worksheet. So these same three tables of top 10 highest grossing films for the past 3 years, I've also got stored individually on separate worksheets. And what I'd like to do first is add to the bottom of each list the biggest and smallest runtime and worldwide gross figures. I don't want to have to repeat that process 3 times once for each sheet, so what we'll do instead is use group mode to add our max and min functions at the same time to all 3 worksheets. So I've got my top 10 2021 worksheet selected. To go into group mode, I can hold down the Shift key and then click on the last of those 3 worksheets. And you should see that all 3 of those worksheets tabs get highlighted in white. You might also notice the beginning of the word group in part of the application title at the top, indicating that you are in group mode. You've got more than one sheet selected. So now I can highlight cells D13 and E13, and then from the AutoSum button, I can insert the max function. It'll automatically pick the correct range of cells for me. And that's happened not just on the worksheet that I'm currently looking at, it's also happened on the other 2 worksheets in the group. I can then do the same sort of thing for the smallest, using the min function. If I select cells D and E14, head to the AutoSum button and pick min. Again, it doesn't pick quite the correct range of cells, so we'll need to edit those individually. Let's change that to D12 rather than D13, and then E12 rather than E13. But again, that's happened automatically on each of the other 2 worksheets. The final thing to do is just make sure that the formatting is sensible for the max worldwide gross. I've got the correct formatting in cell E14, so I can select that, click on the Format Painter tool, and then click on the cell that I want to paste that formatting into. And again, that's happened on all 3 of the worksheets. The single most dangerous thing about group mode is forgetting to exit from it once you've finished, so if I continue working on the sheet I'm looking at, it's going to affect all the selected sheets. So to exit from group mode, I can simply click away from any of the selected ones, and then I've got one single worksheet selected at a time again. So I've got the individual min and max values for each of my 3 separate years on separate sheets. What if I still wanted to find the overall biggest and smallest values and store those on some sort of summary worksheet? So pretending we don't already have this data on our top 10 by year worksheet, maybe let's copy and paste these 2 column headers from cell G2 and G3, and then we'll paste those a little bit further down in the same column. And now I want to find the biggest runtime of any of the runtimes on these 3 worksheets. We could take the same basic approach we took to work out the biggest runtime initially, where we've referenced different ranges of cells on the same sheet. We can also reference different ranges of cells across multiple sheets. So just to give you the basics of that, let's go for equals max, open up some round brackets, and then head to the top 10 2021 worksheet. I could then select that block of cells on that sheet, type in a comma, and then move to the next worksheet and repeat the process, and so on until I've selected all the cells I want. That's okay, I suppose, for 2 or 3 worksheets, but it rapidly gets tedious and error-prone if you have more than that. So the more worksheets you have, the more work you've got to do. I'm going to hit the escape key to abandon that formula, and instead what we're going to do is essentially use the same trick we used to work in group mode, but apply that to a formula. So we're going to insert the max function again into that same cell, and then I'm going to head to the top 10 2021 worksheet and highlight the list of runtimes. Then we're going to hold down the Shift key and click on the last worksheet in the group we want to find the maximum value from. So again, you'll see those 3 worksheet tabs highlighted in white, and if I just have a quick look in the formula bar, you can see that it's inserted a formula that's spanning the 2021 worksheet to the 2023 worksheet, and the block of cells D3 to D12. If I then just close the round brackets and hit enter, we'll return to the original worksheet, and it shows us the maximum value for all those cells across those 3 sheets. We can use the same technique then for the smallest runtime using the min function. So let's just say equals min, open up some round brackets, head to the first worksheet containing the values I want to use, highlight the block of cells, hold down the Shift key, and click on the last of the worksheets you want to find the minimum on, close the round brackets, hit enter to return to the original worksheet and get the correct result again. So we've used the min and the max function to return the smallest and the largest number in a column. What if we wanted to do something a little bit more interesting? If I switch on to the top 50 box office worksheet, this is a list of the top 50 highest grossing movies of all time. We can easily use the min and the max functions to find the smallest and biggest runtimes from the list of runtimes in column D. Let's just quickly do that. For cell J2, I want to find the maximum number in the runtime column. So I'm going to say equals max, open some round brackets, click on cell D2, and then the quickest way to highlight all the cells in that column is to hold down Control and Shift and tap the down arrow key, so that extends the selection down to the end of the list. I can then just close the round brackets and hit enter to get the number of the longest runtime. Exactly the same idea to get the min. I can say equals min in cell J5, open some round brackets and then click on cell D2, hold down Control and Shift, tap the down arrow key to extend the selection down to the end, and then close the round brackets and hit enter. And there's the shortest runtime. That by itself is, I suppose, useful and interesting, but it would be much more useful if I could see some other details of the film with the longest or the shortest runtime. There are several ways we can do this. I guess we could go with the traditional match and index combination approach. But if you're working in a modern version of Excel, probably the easiest way to do this is to use the XLOOKUP function. Now, we've had a video on the XLOOKUP function earlier in this series, so if you need a quick reminder of how it works, feel free to go and revisit that. Just as a quick basic example, let's head to cell J3 and say equals XLOOKUP. The value that I want to look up is the maximum runtime that I've just calculated. I want to try to find that value in the column of all other runtimes, so I'm going to select cell D2 and hold down Control and Shift and tap the down arrow key to extend the selection down to the end. Follow that with another comma, and then I want to return a value not from the runtime column, I've already done that, I want to return a value from the title column. So I'm going to select cell B2, hold down Control and Shift and tap the down arrow key again. If I then close the round brackets and hit enter, I'll see that in that cell I've now got the name of the film with the longest runtime, which is The Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. It's exactly the same approach then to get the name of the shortest film. If I head into cell J6 and say equals XLOOKUP, and the value I'm trying to find is the minimum runtime, which is stored in cell J5, follow that with a comma. I want to look for that number in cell D2 down to the end of the list. So again, select cell D2, Control and Shift and the down arrow key, and then one more comma. And now I want to look for a result from column B. So I'm going to select cell B2, Control and Shift and the down arrow key, and then close the round brackets and hit enter. And then we get the name of the shortest film in that list. For the final example, I'd like to use the results of our min and max functions to apply some conditional formatting to this list of data. So rather than just seeing the names of the longest and shortest films in separate cells, I'd like to highlight an entire row of this table in one colour if the film's runtime is equal to the longest runtime, and in a different colour if it's equal to the shortest runtime. There are several approaches we can take to building this sort of conditional format. I like to start by highlighting all the cells that I might want to potentially format. So I'm going to start by selecting cell A2, then hold down the Control and Shift keys, tap the down arrow key, followed by the right arrow key to highlight all of the data except for the column headers. Now we need to add a conditional formatting rule, so I'm going to head to the Conditional Formatting button in the Home tab of the ribbon, choose to create a new rule, and then choose to use a formula to determine which cells to format. That gives us a simple text box in which we need to enter a logical test to determine whether each cell should receive a format or not. The logical test you write is basically applied to the cell that's currently active on the screen. So at the moment I'm looking at cell A2 is the active cell, that's the one that's highlighted in a different colour. I need to write a conditional format that would apply to cell A2, but then which could be copied downwards and to the right and apply equally correctly to all of the other cells. So this is going to require careful use of absolute and relative cell referencing. So imagine I wanted to format cell A2. A2 should be formatted if the value in column D on that same row is equal to the maximum value of all of the runtimes in cells D2 to D51. So let's start building that basic formula. I'll zoom in a little bit to make it a little easier to see. So it's a logical test where we say equals, then I need to refer to the cell on the same row that I want to potentially apply the format to or check the value of. So that's cell D2. Now I want to make sure that when I fill this formula to the right, the column D doesn't change. The runtime values are always in column D. But when I fill the formula downwards, I need to refer to rows 2, 3, 4, etc. So it has to apply individually to each row of data. So I'm going to use the F4 key to cycle through the various absolute and relative reference combinations until I get to $D2. So that fixes the column reference D, but allows the row number to be dynamic and flexible. So it'll go 2, 3, 4, etc. Now I want to check if the result of that, or the value of that cell, is equal to the maximum value of all the values in column D. So here is where we can insert our max function. So I'm going to insert max, open some round brackets, and then I need to highlight the block of cells that I'm looking for the maximum in. So at this point I'm going to click on cell D2 in the background, hold down Control and Shift and tap the down arrow key, and that will successfully fill in the correct range of cells. It's applied absolute referencing to all the cell references there, and that's what I want. That's a fixed range of cells. Every row of that worksheet is going to look at the same block of runtime minutes. I can then close the round brackets for the max function and then head over to the format button to apply some sort of color. I'm going to use a fill color for this row. I'm going to highlight it in, let's say, in sort of bright blue color. Let's go for blue. I could also apply a border and a font format or a number format if I wanted to, but I'm happy with just a basic background color at that point. So I'm going to click OK and then OK again. And I may have made the text a little bit unreadable here, but if I scroll upwards or downwards to find the correct film, there she is. Lord of the Rings Return of the King is the one film with a runtime equal to the maximum runtime. We can then do exactly the same thing to maybe highlight the shortest film in a slightly different colour. So I'm going to select cell A2 again, hold down Control and Shift, tap the down arrow key, then the right arrow key, head back to Conditional Formatting and choose to create a new rule. We'll use a formula to determine which cells to format, and then in that box we're going to say equals D2, so A2 is again the active cell at the moment. I want to make sure that again we fix the column reference but not the row reference, so it should go to $D2 equals min, open some round brackets, and then in the background I can select cell D2, hold down Control and Shift and tap the down arrow key, and then close the round brackets. So that's what the final formula should look like. I can then use the formatting tool again. I'm going to apply another background colour. Let's go for a bright orange colour this time, and then click OK, and then OK again. And there we can see already the shortest film is highlighted in that beautiful orange colour. So there's a few different ideas for you for using the min and the max functions. It's not just about returning the biggest and smallest number and showing that in a cell. You can also employ it to return other related values and apply dynamic conditional formatting to a list. Hope you found some of those ideas useful. Thanks very much for watching as always, and we'll see you next time.